Well, morning everybody. Welcome to day 2 of our Right Aligned Design Festival. Today we are starting with Nick from Halo, Nick Ellis. It's great to see you, Nick. You finally took part in a bit more of a specific look at a project recently. It was a couple of weeks ago now, wasn't it?
Yes.
And that was really interesting to see the insight into how the studio works and how you create projects for clients. But today we wanted to look more at your story in terms of where you started out, early stage careers, the reason why Halo even came around.
Mm-hmm.
And then once we get that information, it'd be quite good then to sort of bit of a Q&A between me and you about the processes of building that and growing it and finding clients and staff and cultures and all those sorts of things that we hear a lot about but don't always really know how or why it exists.
Yeah.
If anybody else has got any questions, please drop them into the live chat. I'll throw them out there on your behalf. It's great for you guys to get as much out of this as possible. So if there's anything, questions that relating to where you're at or what you're looking to do in future, please just drop them in and I'll ask them for you. But if it's okay, Nick, can I just ask you just to take us back as far as you can remember? Just lead us through those that career lineage.
Okay. Wow. So that's a long time ago now. But I started in publishing. So I started at Future Publishing fundamentally as a designer and then an art director working in sort of the music and entertainment division. I also did a stint on likes of Mountain Biking UK and so that's really where I started as a designer. And then the long and the short of it is launched a magazine which did very well. I went to an award. I won an award, I won a Designer of the Year award at the PPA award ceremony, which is the Periodical Publishers Association. And I won an award for best designer there. And while I was there, there was an advertising agency called Mason Zimbler or MZL, and they were there for another award they were up for. And Mark Mason liked my work, liked me, and invited me in for a chat. Went in for a chat, and he offered me a job to work in his advertising agency, which was a big technology advertising agency working for people like Toshiba and Microsoft, etc. And yeah, I started off there as a designer and worked up to a senior design position, and that was all going great. And I sort of was, it was that sort of classic art director, copywriter teams, big campaign stuff, thoroughly interesting, an amazing group of people, all going really well. Then 9/11 happened and the market completely crashed. Loads of our clients at the time just stopped all their spend, and there was this mass period of redundancy. And I suppose that's the first time I'd experienced redundancy in an industry which is rife with redundancy. So I ended up without a job. I did manage to score a really interesting job working with a small design agency called Buffalo, who specialized in identity work, brand identity work. That was really interesting. Thoroughly enjoyed that. Then sort of, I suppose, bounced around between a few other agencies, spent some time in London working in agencies in freelance capacity. Then I got a job working at an agency whose clients were Diageo, and ended up working on Jack Daniels, pretty much exclusively Jack Daniels and sort of various other booze brands, but Jack Daniels is my main one. Delivered the history campaign that you see all over the tube, and delivered the JD set. So we came up with the idea of the JD set, which is sort of big bands playing in unusual venues to small crowds. And then we did the September campaign. So no one knows when Jack Daniels was born, so we celebrate his birthday over the whole of September. And we created both the advertising campaign and all of the sort of marketing and point of sale and in-store experiences, while sort of in-pub experiences. And at that point, I kind of started to think that I didn't really want to be in an agency, or I wasn't really enjoying the agency experience. Partly I didn't like large agency experience. I felt that it was limiting as a creative. I also, to be honest, there's a load of ego involved, because I just thought I was fucking better than everyone else and therefore shouldn't be told what to do. And so I decided full-heartedly 18 years ago that me and at the time three of my friends, we decided to start an agency, which we did. So we started Halo above a physiotherapist's office in Clifton in Bristol, and we started the sort of the work of trying to pull together. Well, actually, it started off as a digital agency. So primarily we were, and this is how long ago it was. So Flash was a big thing, and we became very good at Flash, and we started making. Now, I mean, there's a load of luck involved, but the first gig that we actually got was for Peugeot, because Peugeot were working. So Peugeot were in rally at the time, so they had a really good, successful rally team. And we pitched to them. So it's a long story, but fundamentally someone we knew was doing some work sort of as a test driver for Peugeot. And through him, we managed to get an introduction to the marketing team, or the head of marketing for Peugeot Rally. And we went for this meeting, and we basically pitched a Flash game. We pitched the idea that we could create a Flash game for desktop, where you could drive a Peugeot rally car around a course. And they went, yeah, let's do that. That sounds wicked. So we made it. And this is at the time, obviously no social media existed at the time. So we created this game and we pitched it on things like Mousebreaker, which was a sort of, just a site where you could play desktop games, and various other things. And we sort of promoted and pitched it. And I think it was one of the first Flash games which got 1 million plays. So we were like, oh, fantastic! We're going to be the guys who make Flash games. That's amazing. And I don't do Flash, so I was doing all of the pitching and sort of going out there and finding clients. And a lot of it in the early days was working with other agencies. So because we had this little niche, and so we went out to other agencies and pitched this niche, and we ended up getting jobs for things like Walker's Crisps, and literally always making Flash games. And then obviously iPhone comes out. Steve Jobs announces that he's not going to allow Flash on the platform, and Flash fucking dies. But interestingly, that didn't really bother me, to be honest, because we'd already started to go, look, we hadn't started an agency to make Flash games. We weren't really that. We enjoyed the challenge of using the technology and playing with it, and we loved the experience. But it wasn't really where we'd seen the agency going. And for me personally, I'm from a branding background and have worked on brand and advertising. So we were like, okay, so Flash is going to die anyway, so we need to start really shifting. And we set about this plan of going, okay, so we're now going to dial down the amount of Flash work that we do, and we're going to really start pushing to find brand clients. And I thought that the thing that was missing in the industry was really, really thoughtful and considered strategic positioning. And what I found is in all the agencies I'd worked at previously is strategy was strategy wasn't really strategy. Strategy was really the rationale for creative. It wasn't really about how best to position a brand, how best to position a brand to win better in the market that it was in. It was very low in terms of research and understanding of category. It was really, strategy was nothing more than, here's what we kind of know about a competitive set in terms of the way they look, and this is how we can make you look different. And I thought that's just so wrong. It isn't what brand is actually about. It still boils branding down to graphic design, which branding isn't. Understanding branding is all about understanding that proposition thoroughly, how that brand connects to an audience in a really meaningful way, what that brand stands for, what drives that brand both internally and externally, and creating that sort of meaningful conversation between consumer and brand. And then once you really understand the market, you've got that huge amount of knowledge about the context in which that brand exists, then you can start looking at how to build that sort of brand universe, which obviously involves the graphic design and the design of the brand. And so did a lot. I mean, that's a steep learning curve, I found, because I had sort of this rudimentary understanding of branding, but then there followed this period of education where I really had to really understand not just branding itself, but I think it's really important to understand marketing. So I had to sort of go through, I always think of it as this, that there's a 3 or 4 years of a really steep learning curve for me, coming from a creative background, to going, right, actually, if I'm going to do branding properly, really going to understand strategy properly, I need to be educated. So I spent a lot of time educating myself and really sort of seeking out the sort of experts that I could tap into, introduce myself to, get to know. And from there, sort of built this sort of ground, a base of knowledge, not just in the way that branding was currently done and how marketing and brand and sort of good brand strategy work together. It was sort of actually looking at what people do and what those current models are, etc. But then also trying to find the way that I would want to do it, the way that makes sense to me, the way that I can find, how do I build value here? And that's the most interesting bit. It's not about regurgitating what other people do, what other people say. It's about sort of making sure that you interpret and create something hopefully more original. And I suppose this really came back to, I had this sort of belief that good brand strategy and brand thinking should not be the sole preserve of large businesses. Sort of on multinational businesses or big famous brands. It applies to everyone, any business that you work with. And so really I wanted to try to create a system of brand strategy that would be as applicable and make sense to a small SME as it would when you're working with sort of the large multinationals that we do. And I think we kind of achieved that. But yeah, so this sort of started, like I say, 18 years ago, there was this sort of steep curve. We get to 2008 and the world explodes with the financial crash. But at that point, actually, we'd worked so hard at sort of delivering, sort of building our reputation as a brand building agency, a brand first agency. And somehow we'd kind of, I know how it happened. We'd won a pitch to rebrand Visit Somerset. And it was the first big pitch that we'd done as an agency. And it was the first time we'd really got to sell our thinking in terms of our strategic approach and obviously all the creative work we do as well. But because we'd won that contract, there was this brief period of time around sort of 2007 to like 2009, where we were like the go-to for regional branding. And so we did things like Visit Somerset, Visit Bath, we worked for Visit Bristol, but we also did things like Visit Worcestershire. So we were kind of, we were doing sort of brand consultancy for things like Shropshire and all sorts. And that actually insulated us from the big financial crash, because a lot of the budgets in terms of places like Somerset, they're already sort of set in stone for a couple of years. So that budget was already there. So we had work coming through the door and with budgets which weren't being slashed. And that actually insulated us. So although we were a very small agency, it stopped us from going under, because we were just in the right place at the right time. A lot of agencies that we knew did go under during the financial crash of 2008, and clawing back was super hard for us. It did hit us, and it did stymie our growth and our opportunity to grow, but it also protected us as an agency from going under. And so about around 2009, we had that other thought of going, fuck, I don't want to just be doing, I don't want to be doing regional fucking branding. Not because it's not thoroughly interesting, and there are some really interesting work that you can do, but we just done loads of it and we were a bit tired of it. And And so we started to sort of branch out. At that moment, we were like, well, what's one of the biggest things that we're really interested in? And so I'm a failed musician. So I've been in multiple bands. I've been signed by a few labels and dropped because I don't write good songs. Not really. But I really love music. And then I was like, okay, so this is literally how it worked. We went, who would we really want to work for as an agency who works in music? So who's the biggest? We were like, well, that's really easy. Ticketmaster and Live Nation are the biggest. I mean, Live Nation's the biggest music brand on the planet. So we were like, okay, I bet you no one ever phones them up and says, hey, we'd like to come in and meet you. No one does that. So we did. We literally phoned up Ticketmaster. We phoned up the head of marketing at Ticketmaster, who at the time was a really brilliant marketer called Nihal Petbecken. And I called her up and introduced myself and literally just said, look, we would love to meet you and show you what we can do. And because I have no idea why she said yes, but she was like, yeah, fuck it, come in. I'm interested. The fact that you phoned me up is interesting enough to me. No one's done that. So she called us in. We went in for a meeting. We pitched our agency to her, and she gave us a gateway product. So she said, okay, I would like you to work on how to help cross-pollination between the multiple festivals that we sell tickets for. And we created this entire web platform, which is called FestiGuru, and was a way really that Ticketmaster could sort of blend multiple festival offerings into one place and cross-pollinate and upsell to people looking for festival tickets. And it went hugely well. It increased their cross-pollination sales by 350% in the first 2 months. And at that point, that went really well. That was going really well. And I went in for a meeting with the team at Ticketmaster just to sort of look at how we were going to extend this festival offering. And that day they went, oh, you couldn't come for a quick meeting, could you, upstairs? And I went up to their boardroom upstairs, and there was basically the lead team at Live Nation for the UK. And in that meeting, they asked me to pitch the agency to them because they'd heard good things. Luckily, I always have a pitching deck with me on my computer. And I pitched. And at that meeting, we won Download and Wireless Festival. And then really from there, we built it up. So we've been the sort of global digital agency for Live Nation and Ticketmaster for a decade now. So we've worked on every known festival you can think of. We've worked on huge tours for various artists and bands and done loads of stuff, and thoroughly interesting. And a lot of the work that we did in the early days was with open source. So we did a lot of open source web work, and Live Nation. I think people always think of Live Nation as this massive globe buggering brand, but they're actually really quite ahead of their time in terms of fandoms and sort of building communities of fans, and they do some really interesting work. They've also done some really cutting edge work in terms of web platform. So we've done lots of really interesting work with them. And so that became this sort of big part of our business. Obviously got a kick in the nuts during the pandemic. But a big part of our business, really helped us grow our digital reputation. But at the same time, we'd also done a lot of strategic positioning work for them, which we're, so we worked on the We Get Fans strategy, which is their global strategy, which really helped build our global reputation in that sphere. And then that's led on to other sort of other areas of our work. So once we started to build that strategic platform and people were sort of coming to us for brand strategy, we then started to move into FMCG. So we've done a lot of food and drink, we've done a lot of beer and breweries. We've done a lot of work with, some of the big food producers. So people like Cranswick PLC they've been a retained client of ours for over a decade. We work with Bakkavor, but we've also worked with Waitrose and people like M&S and Tesco's, and done a lot of trend analysis work and sort of looking at category culture, category behavior for those guys. And then at the same time, there was this whole other area, which I really love, which is professional services. So we've done a lot of work in finance and things like executive search and sort of big old corporate sort of management consultancy stuff, which I know that people would go, oh, that sounds incredibly dull, but actually it's some of the most interesting and beautiful work that we've done has been in that space. And that's anyone from people like AXA, where we've delivered brand strategy, brand positioning and design work for sort of ISA products, all the way through to doing work with St James's Place, who are an enormous investment group, doing work for working with IFAs, working directly with pensions, etc. So it's been really interesting. And then at the same time, we also did work for EDF. We did a massive engineering product brand for EDF, and all of it. It's sort of, I think it all comes down to, why do we have such a broad range of clients? Is because we're a brand first agency. So we're a strategically led agency. So we can work in any market, we can work with any client, because our approach is brand first, brand led. And that leads us to have some thoroughly interesting clients we would never expect. Anything right now is from like global packaging work for Church and Dwight, where we've done Batiste. We've worked on the Trojan condoms brand, on a load of strategy for that coming into Europe. And at the other end of the scale, we're working for an electric vehicle charger tech brand who are a big startup doing really interesting stuff. So it's literally from dry hair shampoo to electric charging to working for the RAC. We do a lot of work for the RAC. So it's thoroughly interesting. It's been a funny old journey.
I mean, that project you shared with us, the Flare one.
Yeah.
That was excuse me, an example of that, isn't it? Where it's a predominantly quite corporate, a very boring sort of area of the world, but by introducing the processes that you do through the strategy and the design, etc., etc.
Yeah.
Really reshaped that. From it gave a completely new meaning when you talked us through it compared to when you pasted this. Do you think that the where you're at now is really down to that, taking that time to learn the branding, after the Peugeot piece, and that when iPhones came out, etc., and that blew up where you sort of accidentally found yourself? Do you think that time dedicated to really sort of understanding who you wanted to be as a studio, as creatives, that's really shaped where you're at now?
Yeah, massively. The interesting thing is, and we talk about strategy all the time now, and it's sort of this sort of ubiquitous part of the creative industry. But I genuinely, when we started out as a brand strategy agency, so refusing to do creative work until we really had a clear understanding through strategy of where we were going, what we were trying to achieve, no fucker wanted to buy that. They just didn't. That people just understood it as, I need a brand, so therefore I need a logo, therefore I need a designer. And it was really hard. It was really hard pitching ourselves as a strategic-led agency. And now everyone does it. And I think to a certain extent I do believe that's a good thing. I think that's the right thing. But it was really difficult. And it was really difficult because people just didn't know they needed it. If you were maybe working in large advertising agency, if you were a large advertising client working with someone like Ogilvy, you would expect a certain amount of strategic thinking before you get into the campaign, for example. But there was a lot, really, we found that a lot of clients just did not understand or see the value with what we were offering. So there was a lot of education of clients as well for us. But if I genuinely believe that the years that I spent really studying the craft of it and really trying to understand how strategy could have huge benefits to every client that we worked with and deliver real value beyond just cool aesthetics, has been transformative. And I think that is why, if you can say we're successful, we've been going for 18 years. I think that's successful. I know there's I never think of us as really huge, successful agency. But I do believe any of the success that we have had has come from being single-minded in the fact that we are a strategically led agency, and that is what you buy when you buy us.
Yeah.
And so we do great creative work, I think, and I think we do very strong creative. We are very strong creatively, but it is because it's grounded in really good thinking and original thinking.
Yeah, and at the time, did that feel like at that specific moment, or even though it was over quite a long period of time, you said 3 to 4 years roughly,
Yeah.
did that feel like actually we need to find our own purpose now? We need to understand what we are, because then that make it so much easier to sell to clients. It makes it, as opposed to just being another designer or another agency, because I sort of vaguely remember those times too where strategy, it wasn't even used as a word that I
Yeah.
can remember. It was a case of, we need a strap line, let's just pick 3 random words out of the dictionary and hope for the best of it, because
Yeah, totally.
nobody was none the wiser. We just, create a lot of blue logos. That seems to be how I remember.
Yeah, yeah, totally.
Helvetica and blue was the staple diet. So did that feel like, because I was speaking to somebody yesterday, and they're focused on working just with people within their local area, so within a relatively small geographic area, because they really care about the difference that they can make to people's lives. And that was really nice to hear somebody that, that's really, how that will shape in the future, is only time will tell. But did that feel like that to you in that period? You were sort of like, this is where we need to set out our pitch, so to speak. So when we do talk to people about the studio, they'll know it's stands for something as opposed to just being a generic bread and butter agency.
Yeah, totally. So there was a period there was a dark period where you would try to go in and pitch strategy, and people would say, I don't need strategy. I need a new logo. There was and actually I got really fucking tired of explaining that a logo is not a brand. It is a shortcut to everything you know about a brand, and it triggers those memory structures. And honestly, actually, do you know what? One of the best things that happened to us was when How Brands Grow came out. So when Byron Sharp released How Brands Grow, it was fucking genius. Not because I love How Brands Grow. It's a very good book. I think it's entry-level brand. I think it's entry-level thinking for branding and advertising sort of communications, but it is excellent. And what happened was quite a lot of clients started to educate themselves through how brands grow, because it's an accessible book. And suddenly I was starting to notice that stuff that we've been saying and stuff that we've been trying to explain and educate on, actually How Brands Grow really helped. It helped give people a foundation in what brand and brand strategy really means. And it really helped us when we were talking to clients, especially if they'd read How Brands, or were able to suggest they read it. But often people were coming to us and going, oh, I've read How Brands Grow. That's really interesting. And I actually had a few people come back, people that we'd spoken to months before, who'd gone, no, we don't really think we need strategy, who came back and went, actually, I've just read How Brands Grow, and quite a lot of what you said, it resonates with me now. So I have to thank Byron Sharp, actually, for, I would argue, for some of the growth of our agency, because he educated a ton of marketers in a way which no one else had done previously.
I might have to buy a few thousand copies of that and send it out to people.
Honestly, it's really good. I mean, it's so entry level. It literally, it's got some of the absolute core basics in there. So things like, we talk about distinctive brand assets now. We used to, when I started, we used to call them distinguishing marks of a brand. And then How Brands Grow reframes that as distinctive assets. We just talk about distinctive assets all the time now. But that came from How Brands Grow. Yeah. And it's just super interesting how that sort of how one book can be so important and permeate through an entire industry.
Yeah, they tend to be those sort of landmark occasions, don't they? Across all industries and all different sorts of sectors and niches, where something comes out that seems to go a bit more mainstream, doesn't it? And it appeals to a wider audience.
Well, no, and so the alternate, this one upsets the strategy lot. But so Simon Sinek released the book Start With Why, right? Which gets ripped to shreds by loads of strategy thinkers on the likes of Twitter and LinkedIn. They'll give it a good old kicking. but I have no problem with that. I don't have a problem with his golden circle. I think I do think that it's very basic. I don't think it actually, when you sort of dig deeper into into it, it's quite flimsy, and it's not very robust. However, it's super easy to read, and it's a good read. It's it's a fun book to read, and loads of people have read it, and so they are interested in brand purpose. And I think brand purpose has been fucked with quite badly by people using it as a way to wash either societally or environmentally, but they kind of use purpose in a poor way. However, Start With Why has been a brilliant entry-level thought for a lot of clients. You can go, oh shit, the brand is actually, there's much more emotional resonance in a brand. There's much more value that we can bring from it, and we really need to think of it in these ways. And I think that I'm a big fan of, if someone says to me that they've read Simon Sinek, I am not one of those people who just thinks, oh fuck, what, you're an idiot. I actually think this is, I think this is amazing, because we're now able to have a conversation about the value of brand, which goes way beyond just the way that it looks, way beyond just marketing, into an interesting emotional place. And whether I agree with his findings or not doesn't matter, because he has opened up that conversation. And I think he should be celebrated for that, even though I know that there'll be loads of people that I'm connected to in the strategy community who are just, rubbing their eyes. And
but for me, that goes a little bit back to when you talked about the entry level for the How Brands Grow book. Is that when I first saw that Simon Sinek talk, the TED talk, which is a concise version of that book, that really sparked something for me, because I was like a junior looking to go to midweight, and I was sort of like, it just went, oh right, okay, I sort of I see this. So it's
exactly that.
Where you're at, it doesn't have to be a gospel to the big dive of strategy.
Look, strategy should be strategy. The whole point of strategy is that it's meant to be accessible. It's meant to be accessible and help people understand where they are and where they're going to go. That's the fundamental role of strategy, is to make things clearer. And so we live in an industry now, as strategy has grown, as a discipline, it's sort of got muddied with chin scratching marketing science, which there is value in it. But I think it's actually built walls, and it's made it harder to sort of, it's harder to really get clear, concise, distilled, meaningful strategy. Often strategy it can be used sort of just to inflate fees, and it's kind of hides under this sort of pseudoscience, which is not always helpful. And I think that Start With Why, although has its problems, as a gateway drug to the value of strategy, it has something, and he's a brilliant speaker. So therefore, if you see the TED talk, you kind of go, fuck yeah, branding's really cool.
Also, most people only want recreational strategy, don't they? Not everybody needs to have that endless, scratching of the head.
No, you don't. I mean,
on somebody else. So someone like Simon Sinek, I think he delivers that to a point where he makes you start to actually realise you need it, and I want it, and I want to know a bit more. But I don't necessarily need to be an addict to it.
Yeah. Totally agree.
I'm just conscious of time, so I just want to go through some of the questions that the guys have dropped in.
Mm-hmm.
Joey has asked, apologies if I've said that completely wrong, what would be your most important piece of advice to somebody thinking about starting a small studio from scratch?
Okay, well, I'd say first of all, do it. It's a roller coaster, but absolutely just fucking do it, because why not? I mean, the majority of our industry is small agencies. It's like 1% is the WPPs, the Ogilvies, the Saatchis, the fucking, design studios, etc. The majority of it are small, sort of 7 or under. There's loads of opportunity to make a really good living as a creative person with an agency working with interesting businesses. And what you quickly learn is you may not end up working with sort of big famous brands. That's hard to do, right? but you can have a really thoroughly meaningful, interesting, immersive career just working with businesses that a lot of people have never heard of. But you just end up learning so much about the way that business and categories work. It's thoroughly fascinating. It is hard, but it is thoroughly fascinating. And I think that there's a real value. Having your own agency is such a joy. It's also nice to be in charge of your own destiny. So if you make a fucking mistake, you make the fucking mistake. You don't have to blame anyone else. It's good.
And I was also thinking, when you're going through that, sorry, Mark, I'll ask you a question in a second, but it can feel like sometimes, oh, you're in the right place at the right time. And people always say that, and I just happen to do this. But from my perspective, I look at that as in like seizing opportunities, because it's just sort of like, yeah, I'll take that, I'll do this, let's have a go at this. Is that something that's in your DNA? Do you think
you have to do that? That's absolutely it. So right, so if you look at the history of Halo, there is an absolute fuck ton of luck involved. It's all, I mean, right, I've said this before, I think, I don't want to bore anyone, but so I'm already lucky, can already see that I'm lucky. For a start, when I started this agency, I was the right sex and the right color. That really helps. So I'm already born into a privileged position. And then beyond that, there was so much right place, right time. Just imagine, think of the luck involved in phoning up Ticketmaster and then going, yeah, come in. That's luck. That's catching someone at the right moment on the right day and then having one good idea which might work.
But that could also be seen as you've taken the chance to do that.
Oh, no, totally. But it's a bit, so you don't, right, luck is huge. Yeah, you're right. But it's still lucky. I phoned at the right time. I had the balls to do it, and obviously I sort of fitted the part at the time. So I sort of, it was young then, but there was an opportunity. I grabbed it. We are where we are. But there is so much luck involved. But I mean, I always think that's that thing about you've got to be working hard to take those opportunities when they come, to sort of play your luck well. You really need to be working hard at it. And so, because you've got to be prepared. So when there is a moment like Ticketmaster say, come in, or will Live Nation go, yeah, have you got time for a meeting? That you are already prepared for that meeting. You're ready to go. You're not flummoxed by it. You are in that moment and you are ready to do it. And running an agency is always about being ready, I think.
Marcus asked about, with multiple founders, what was that look like in reality? So from paying yourselves, investing, going full time from previous employment, etc. How did that shape itself for you guys?
Okay, so the full disclosure is there's only 2 of the original founders now. And very quickly we lost our first, 2 of our founders left. One of our founders left after 3 years. As soon as we sort of had to move into that steep learning curve and sort of shifting the agency from just delivering flash games into a space where we were, very much going into the strategy space. And one of our founders quickly exited the business. It wasn't for him. And then a few years later, another one of our founders actually had to leave due to ill health. And so it's just been me and my business partner Vern since then. For the last 10 years, it's just been us. But when we started, money was shit, right? It was just shit. And so we paid ourselves really low. I mean, obviously, because we own the business, we paid ourselves through dividends. But that sounds great, but that relies on you making profit. And so making profit was pretty tough at the beginning, to be honest. I mean, we had some bank loans and overdrafts is what we were really running on. And that was probably for a good few years. We got paid terribly. And it took after that. I mean, we've been very conservative. I've never actually, we don't take huge salaries. We've been very careful not to. We don't bleed the business. We invest back into the business. And that investment back into the business, meaning that we can employ the best people we can afford, and really focusing on growing a team of really talented people, which obviously costs money. which means that you have to sacrifice a certain lifestyle, but it does pay off later down the line. So I would say the first 8 years of Halo's life, well, let's say the first 10 years of Halo's life, was I financially successful? Not by lots of standards, but I did pay my mortgage, and I was able to go to Cornwall on holiday. So it was actually not a bad life. And I was in charge of my own destiny. So that's really strong. Over the last few years, obviously, as the agency has grown and we have made more money, I've managed to start making more money. And that's been excellent. But I wouldn't, what we sacrificed for the first 10 years has been really important, because I'm able to employ really, really good people to help make the agency more successful. I think building an agency is about playing the long game if you're intending to scale it. I mean, you can make a fantastic living just, as a small, I don't know, 5-person agency. You can make a fantastic living and you can have a really lovely life doing it. And it's a really strong lifestyle business. And for us, we wanted to scale. So there's 30 plus of us now. That takes a lot of effort and a lot of sacrifice at the beginning, but it's totally been worth doing. But yeah, I mean, it's just paying, we pay ourselves through dividends, me and my business partner, fundamentally.
Matt has asked, it'll probably be the last one, I think, Nick, about the biggest hurdles in incorporating strategy into his offering is trying to understand those sectors that he's working with properly without guesswork or assumptions. Is there any steps that you guys take to understand different audiences and focus groups? Obviously, their individual clients have to be taken on their own merits, but are there certain things in place that you do to, obviously, if you're working now with quite a lot of, say, F&B brands, we're all within the same space, aren't they? But say if we put you into a completely different industry, would there be a way of understanding how that community and consumer works?
Yeah, so when you first hit a category, whatever the category is, you need to understand the context in which the brand lives in that category. So you're going to need a bunch of research. So first of all, you need the research from the actual client themselves. So where are they sat? What's their finances look like? So the big thing, how do you make money? Where are your margins at, et cetera, et cetera. So you have to have a really clear understanding of how the business that you're about to work with actually makes money and how their business runs. Then you have to look at the context of the category in which they're in. So you have to understand, we actually have to understand how much that category is worth, where the growth is in that category. So this is all research that you can do from your desk effectively. And you can do a certain amount of competitive set research as well. You might find, and we do a lot, is that you will have to buy in some secondary research. So you might go to Kantar or Mitel or whatever, and you're looking for very specific answers. So at this point, you might have hypotheses about the way things work and the way the category behaves. And what you're trying to do is understand whether those hypotheses are correct or not. So you might look to get some research paid for them. And then you might, once you kind of understand what you've got in terms of your secondary research, then you might start looking to do primary research, which is when we've got very specific questions which we haven't got answers for. So then we would go to a research business and we would find, and we would task them with answering these issues for us so that we've got the data to back it up. Every way that you approach it, the best way to think about it is you go, I need to understand the context. So I have to understand how the business works and the context in which it plays and how it can win there. You have to know that. So it's going to be a mix of secondary research and it's going to be and primary research, which you commission. And it's going to be there's going to be a bit of number crunching, and actually the big tip that I would give when you start working with any business is get to know their finance team. So understand have a meeting with the financial director, get the lowdown on where that money is made, how that money is lost, and really get a sound understanding of the finances of that business. Because once you've got that, that's really fucking helpful for anywhere else you're going to go, because you have to remember, no one is coming to you for strategy unless they want to make more money down the line. That's the whole point of this, is the commercial value that you're offering. So you have to have a really good commercial grounding in order to do any work on there for the brand. But yeah, so you start with your context, then you start looking for opportunities, the challenges and opportunities within that category and where you think you could win. And then and only then do you start to build a brand strategy based on that research. But it's any given category, different categories will have different amounts of secondary research which is available to you. So if you're doing a beer brand, you'll find it very easy to find data about a beer, about the beer market, about craft beer market, etc., etc. It's all there. You just need to get busy on Google finding this stuff. When we worked for EDF recently, I have no knowledge about digital twinning or the industrial Internet of Things. I have no understanding of how power is created and delivered to the national grid. I had to learn all of that stuff. And that's partly learning it from the client themselves, and that's partly from actually getting busy with research and understanding that market yourself.
Brilliant. One final one for me, I promise. Is it for anybody that's, say, just starting out as a business owner or studio owner, or is in a smallish studio, can you scale down strategy to make it worthwhile? Do you think, can you, say if a client hasn't got a budget or a time frame, would it be best just to not do it? Or can you rein it in and have it as a shorter process that still at least addresses some of the issues on a bit deeper level?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, of course you can. Strategy, I would think of it as that's a very sort of agile, light version, but it will always have value. So at the very least, right? So I think I showed this before in my talk. At the very least, we have a strategy model, which is effectively a workshop, an ability to do a workshop with your clients. And what it does is, at the very base of it, in our strategy canvas, is it looks at the market forces. So you get the client to talk about the market forces which affect their business, the headwinds that they're facing. And it could be what other players are in that market. It might be sort of anything political, or it could be anything to do with technology. But what you're looking for is, what are the drivers in the market you're in? And you can quickly ask them about that. And then you're looking at who's your primary audience, or what we would class as your evangelist audience. So the people who are actually going to love you the most. And what is it that you have that has value to them? You basically get that mapped out very, very quickly. And then you start going into, you ask them about the sort of the key drivers, the actual, what we class as guiding principles. What do you do as a business which you believe is integral to the way that you work? So just getting that session within about 3 hours, you will have a really good understanding from your client about how that business fundamentally functions and what really matters to that business. And that is never a waste of time. And you can, if you want to do it, and charge them a day's time for doing that. But I would absolutely say that you can never start creative work unless you have, a day with the client, going through, even if it is a basic brand canvas model, so that you just get that better understanding. It allows you to ask the difficult questions, or as I would class it, the stupid questions. Ask the fucking stupid questions that you've got in your head that you just want answered. No one is ever going to mind you doing that. So even at its very core, the most basic sort of brand canvas model is still the most valuable thing you can do before you do any creative work, because it gives you a grounding in what that strategic approach is going to be. And I would say that all design agencies need to get used to doing that, because that's going to inform your work and make it successful. And I think I would always say, we do commercial creativity. Nobody comes to an agency because they just want to produce art. They want that to have an effect on their business. They want to have a positive effect. So you need some basis of strategy, because you need to kind of go, well, this is where we are, and this is where we want to go, and this is the fundamental structure we think is our best bet for getting there. And that should inform it. Otherwise, design is so subjective. At the very least, basic brand strategy removes or doesn't remove subjectivity, but it pushes objectivity into the process. And that is the most valuable thing you can do as a creative business.
Brilliant. That's amazing, Nick. Appreciate that. Your time again. I will promise to leave you alone for a couple of days.
No, I thoroughly love it.
No, it's really, really interesting. It's so nice to hear. Just, I'll keep on saying this to everybody, but behind the work is, I think it's so invaluable for people to hear individual stories and how people have got to where they've got to and what they, you know, I'm not going to say the processes again, the steps that they take. I keep on saying that word too much. It's just too easy. Yeah, it's really insightful just to sort of, you know, get behind under the hood, so to speak. So I'll leave you to it.
Thank you so much for having me, and thank you to everyone who stayed. That's very kind of you.
I hope everybody got a lot out of this, and the comments have been really, really pleasant, really supportive. So everybody has enjoyed that, Nick. So we'll leave you be.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
See you soon. Take care.
See you later. Bye.
Bye.